So the last suggestion or rule when you are doing sectioning. When you are showing breaks, follow the conventions as outlined on page 7, 88, and 89. So let's go there. So let's start with just our standard rectangular breaks, which are numbers C, D, and E at the bottom. These sections are used, or these kind of break lines here are used primarily for the broken out section. So what we're using here is a short break line. Remember, the short break line, when you do it, the line weight should be .031. We want it very, very thick, right? 0.7 millimeter pencil if you're doing it by hand. And then we try and use or replicate how the material breaks. If you don't know how the material breaks, buy something and go out and whack it. Break it. Now that can get kind of expensive with some parts.
Yeah.
That's maybe a little internet search at that point, or asking somebody for some advice. So, the point being here, if you got steel or plastic, it kind of breaks. Steel would break more like this. If I had plastic, I would probably make it sharp cornered or smooth cornered, where smooth would be a soft plastic, sharp corner would be a hard plastic. Wood, kind of fibrous, right? I'll get splinters from that stuff. That looks real good on it. Glass can break a variety of ways, whether I'm doing tempered or standard, or any of our other types of glasses, like maybe bulletproof glass, whatever the case might be. So we try and break those as they normally would to replicate that break. Now, where things, like we've talked about that quite a bit, where things change is when we get round devices. We do have some breaks that we use for round devices, and they're like these two. If I have a solid round, I break it and hatch these areas accordingly. Okay, like it's being broke along that circle. If I have a tube, think of a pipe, okay, I break it where I'm showing that pipe, and I'm putting hatch lines accordingly. Now these would all be for like a revolved or a removed section, right? Where we're taking and showing handles and switching that thing in between. So what there would probably be, if I was doing this section, these would be a little further apart, and then let's say this one's circular in nature, there would be this in between them, and it would also be hatched like this, right? If this was, I was breaking this to show it to them, I would have these two breaks, they'd be a little further apart, and I won't draw a big one again, but what I would have on this case is this, and then hatch it accordingly. That would sit right here in the middle, okay, for a revolved section. Remember those? So how do we make these? Sad to say, CAD does not have a drop-in device on these. Okay, so in essence, if you make one, the instructions on how to do it are on this side. I would take the time in CAD to make one of these on a 1-inch diameter pipe, and then I would block it and throw it in my library. Okay, just following these instructions. Why would I make it with a 1-inch pipe?
It's easy
Or
to
a
scale.
1-inch round?
Easy to scale.
Because then I can scale very quickly, right? Because if it's already one unit and I want a 1/2-inch one, I would then take that and scale it by 0.5. If I wanted one that was 2 inches, I'd scale it by 2. And I would have all that done. This is also what can be used for manual drafting. Okay, folks, I tell you, I would not go through this process on a manual drawing. Because I don't think you're going to get that much of a result over what a little practice would do, and that's going to take you 15 minutes. And that same 15 minutes you can practice and you never have to practice again. It's kind of like that very first manual drawing assignment where I asked you to measure your hidden lines, phantom lines. What was the whole purpose of that? so that you get used to recognizing those and you never measure another one and you do it and you can recognize it on any drawing. These things are the same way. And with a little bit of practice, you can get these. Okay, so all you want to do is show your profile view, something like this. If it's a solid brown, and get used to using this little S shape like such. And then when I come to the other side, it's just going to be the opposite. And the same shape. Okay. But now I come in and add one other part, okay, and I can hatch those. Now I'll tell you what, if I would have sat down and done that with all the measurements and devices up here, you probably couldn't tell the difference if I overlay it. But just get to where you practice these a little bit. You can do the tube even also very quickly. Keep in mind when you do that tube, notice it goes fatter in here. It's in essence 2 ellipses. You can still do those, just make a raindrop. It's the same shape that we did here, but then I would come through and I make a raindrop. Okay? At least that's what I think of on it. Okay? And I make that raindrop, or a piece of drop of water that's getting ready to fall off of something, and then I can hatch around it. What's that?
Wouldn't that raindrop go the other way?
Doesn't it start at the center and go up?
Yeah, they go from the center up. Thank you. I'm dyslexic this morning. Let's do it right. Okay. So you'd start right on that spot. This time we're in outer space, and my raindrop's going up. But again, practice those a little bit. You have some of these on your worksheets. Before you put them on your worksheets, please grab a piece of scratch paper and practice them for a couple minutes so that you get a good representative symbol. That's in essence what we're doing here, right? Symbol. So keep in mind, when we are breaking objects, use a short break line, try and represent the material you are breaking, make it look like it. If you get to a round or a pipe, you change that. All circular devices are broken this way. All right, that kind of summarizes all of the sections. We started with your line types, we went to our 7-fold sections, defined all those, then we went to our sectioning rules of thumb, went through all of those. Tomorrow, we'll do a review on all of that test the following day. Now we have one other thing. Chapter 23 out of your AutoCAD book was the boundary hatch command. And let's just go over that real quick, make sure you can understand that. So let's go to CAD. And if you would, can you open a drawing? And if you would, kind of put some shape, kind of like I've got up here. Just, they could be squares, circles, whatever. They should be in and out of each other. These aren't any set size here. Anybody need more time? Raise your hand. Okay. All right, when you're doing sectioning, first off, we have put a layer in your templates that is for this. Okay. I'll kind of highlight it up here. It's the section layer. You want to put your hatching on the section layer. Notice it's set up for section lines where they're continuous, they're thin lines. Okay. Now, we had to duplicate, when I put this together, since we got more layers and we have primary colors, we duplicated the green. It's the only color that is duplicated on these layers. What's the other color that's green? Should there ever be a hidden line in a section view? Okay, so that's why we duplicated it, because now if you get far away, a lot of you have noticed your hidden lines go solid and stuff, and things don't look right when you've got a big object. Well, now you can do it by color, because you'll recognize the hatch pattern. Now, oh, that's a hatch. You'll recognize one single line by itself that's green. That's a hidden. That's why we duplicated those primary colors with those two layers. So when you're hatching, make that layer current, please. So, or you don't have to, but you should end up on that layer you're hatching. Okay. Now, when you go ahead and hatch, I'm not even sure where it's at in your ribbons. It's BH. Where's it at in the ribbons? Anybody know? Actually, it's right here on the home draw. Right here. Now, when you do these, there's two types. Okay, there is a drop-down box on here. There is the hatch and the gradient. We're going to leave the gradient alone for right now, although it is explained in that chapter. If you go through it, that's fine. We don't use a lot of gradients unless we're doing pictorial views, so I'll go into the gradient hatch next semester when we start doing pictorials. For now, we're just dealing with the boundary hatch. So go ahead and click on it. Now, a lot like one of these others, like M-Text and stuff, notice your ribbon changed entirely for this. So here's your options across the top. Say, over on the first section, this is where you select items to hatch. That's the first part on the left. The next part is your patterns. The next part is how you want the pattern to look, like angle and scale. And then the last part is how you want it to behave. Now again, on that associative, hatches are supposed to be associative. So what does that mean? Or excuse me, yeah, associative. Associative. What does associative mean?
It'll be connected, like it'll be all one entity.
Yeah, we had that on the array, right, where it made it all really like a block. Right. Again, I would kind of recommend that you do not run that on it. You can also make them annotative. What does annotative mean?
Scale.
Yep. Works with the scale. You can't use this at all. You can make them associative and still get them to work. Annotative, you can't. Now the reason you're going to find out is on that scale thing. When we look at them, you're going to have some of them that work really well, annotative, and you're going to have some that scale totally opposite. Instead of getting larger when your scale gets bigger, they get smaller. And then you'll do another one, it gets larger when you're larger. It's switched around. Okay. So I would stay away from the annotative altogether. Now, how do you get it the right size then? We'll kind of talk about that as we go through it. Really kind of experience. I got a guideline for you, I'll show you. But other than that, it's just looking at it and trusting your eyes. So here's in essence how you do it. So we'll just go through this. First step, we need to define what we want to hatch. Okay. Now, when you do this, keep in mind that you should have a closed polygon, right? Because you've got to have your hatched area has to be completely bound by object lines. Make sure you take a second to check that before you hatch. I used to tell all students before you hatch, there's one thing that they don't tell you, hit the save button. Okay, because there are times that this thing's going to lock your machine up. It's getting much better. I do have kind of a funny little story though. The second year I taught, when this didn't work that well, we always had to hit save. If I had an open spot where, let's say I was hatching here and that line wasn't snapped together, so when I click in here and say, I want you to hatch this, it's going to search and do a mathematical formula to find that closed area. Well, if that's not closed and it kind of leaks out, how big is your screen? It's infinite, right? So you are, in essence, trying to hatch the universe. That takes a little computing power. We actually went, it's a pretty funny story. Second year I was down here teaching. We went to the ITD in Shoshone, and they were using MicroStation. They said, I'll jump on these machines. You can't do anything wrong. And of course, Jerry Gardner jumps on there and immediately goes to the boundary hatch for some reason, clicks out in the open space, shuts the entire state of Idaho down. Okay, on the ITD. Because it leaked out, went to the servers in Boise, overloaded them, shut the whole state down. It's pretty darn funny.
The whole thing? Do you guys
Yeah.
get in trouble?
No, we just kind of chuckled about it. Say, well, I guess we won't let you just jump on our machines and play anymore. But it can't happen. Now, CAD has done some things to fix that. That's not as big a problem in today's world as it was 15 years ago. It's still a good idea, hit the save button before you go to the boundary hatchment option. Because if you've got an error out there, it'll go, now, it'll try and fix these errors now, but it will still, if it can't fix it, after about 10 minutes, it'll lock your machine up for like 10 minutes and then just may stop. Okay? And you're going to lose everything. Okay? Because the only way to get out of it is to kill your computer. That's why I say, hit the save button. It's just a good idea. Now, there's ways to get around that, and I'll show you those. But let's just go ahead and create a hatch. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here. There are two ways to do it. Most of the time, in fact, 99.9% of the time, you're just going to use this little pick button. Okay? So I'm going to click on my pick button. Now on mine, what you generally want to do is click in your outside shape. But depending on how it's set up to work, okay, and we'll go through these options. So I'm just going to click in one of these rings of the circle. I'm going to do this one so you can see how it finds that closed boundary. Okay. So I'm going to click that. Now, as soon as I click this, notice what it's selected. It's selected from here, everything inside. Okay. But it didn't go outside. It didn't select the stuff to the outside. Okay. So it's going to find your first full shape, and then it is going to get everything inside of that. It's going to select it. Whether it's M-text, whether it's this, whatever. It's going to find it. Okay. What it knows is that you have to go where you click this rock, and then it's got to go air, rock, air. Because you have to have everything selected with OBJ lines, right? That's the way hatching works. Okay? Rock, air, rock, air. So it's going to find that. Now, we just looked at some examples where it might be rock and then rock of a different type, right? You can override that and make it work differently. And it might be rock again, but it's switched to a different type of rock. So in essence, that's what it's found. Now, once you do that, it throws the pattern in that is selected, which your patterns are up here. The next thing you generally want to do is choose the pattern. Now, I'm just going to click my little drop-down box, and you can see all the patterns here, and there is a slide bar. Okay? So there's a bunch of patterns in here. Okay, the top ones, and these line up with all the patterns you have in Chapter 16, where the ANSI 31 is your cast iron, ANSI 32 is your steel, 33 was your soft metals, okay, so on and so forth. So you can choose any pattern you wish. There is also a solid hatch if you want to make things just continuous. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it on ANSI 31. That's my pattern. Then you have a little properties area. I would suggest that here you don't change anything in the first three where it says pattern, color by layer, line type, none. Okay, let the layer control that. Okay, put it on that section layer and it will do all of these things for you. Over on the next section, it's got transparency, angle, and scale. Now this pattern is already set up at 45 degrees. But we've already talked, maybe I had some geometry that was around 45 degrees and I need to rotate that pattern. Maybe I've got this one and then I want to go on the other direction, the other way for the next one. Just change your angle. Okay. So on this one, keep in mind it's already at 45. So if I put 45 in again,
It'd be 90.
it's going to be vertical, right? It's going to rotate from here. By the way, this ANSI 31 pattern, this is a great one for architectural because it works for shingles, it works for siding, works for a whole bunch of different items. Okay. So, again, just kind of play with that. The scale one, what do you do with scale? This is where you override the annotation part. Okay. What I would suggest is that when you start your patterns, always put your scale equal to your DSF. That's a good place to start. Then you will have to adjust them, and many times you've got to print it to see how it's going to look before you can adjust it. But you might have them too dense, and so it prints as a black blob. You might have them not dense enough where you can't really see a pattern, or they look like lines. But a good place to start is what your DSF is. So if I was doing a metric drawing, I would put my scale at 25, and I would start that. If I had a scale of 1 to 10, I would put the scale at 10. They could start from there. So that's what that piece is. In this case, drawing 1 to 1, my DSF's 1, I'm going to leave it alone. And this stuff out here is just kind of other things that work on it. Okay. Now, to be done, all you do is hit enter or your little green check mark. Okay. Then it goes ahead and creates the hatch. Go ahead and create it. Now, if you don't like this hatch, how do I edit it? Remember that little double-click edit deal? That opens different editing options? It works here also. It's going to open the edit, which is boundary hatch edit. So just double-click it. Okay, so I come in, if I say, you know, I got to change something, I've got it where the scale needs to change, just double-click it. Excuse me. And my ribbon changes, but generally I also get kind of this little quick properties thing that hits the majority of the items, and I can just change it real quickly. This is why I say don't make these associative either, because if I did 3 or 4 hatches and I change one of them, all of them are changing. Now maybe you want that, most of the time you don't. So here, let's come in and I'm going to say, well, I want my scale to be 2. I'm going to change my angle to, how about 90 degrees to go the other direction. And then I just hit enter. Now I got to close that box. Now I'm good. Now I switch the angle and the size of it. Okay, you pretty good on that? All right, now, there's some other options on here that you really kind of want to play with. So I'm going to just delete this hatch back out, and I'm going to go into boundary hatch again. So if you would, delete your hatch. Let's do boundary hatch again. Okay, so delete your hatch. Go back into hatching. Leave your hatch up. You're hatching. Oh, you did now. All right. Now, notice I've got some more options here on my pick spot. I can select, I can do those. I've got patterns, I've got more options on property, origin, options. Okay. You can do each one of those individually, but also notice there's one here that goes at an angle. What does that generally do when you get that little fly out that's on an angle?
Pulls up properties.
Opens a dialog box, right, that has all this stuff in it, kind of like the style command for text or, well, we saw many others. Click on that little sideways arrow. Now you're going to get a little dialog box that opens up. The first time you do it, this dialog box is not showing you all the options either. There's a little expand button down here on the right bottom corner. And folks, I will tell you, I still use this one as opposed to the ribbon because this seems to me much easier to work with than this ribbon up here where I've got all the options. Okay. And so here we come through, here is our pattern type. Okay, it's a little easier to use now. You got for your patterns, you got a swatch, you got a little drop-down box where you can choose all that stuff. Here's your angle and scale. Here's all your origins where if you're changing any of that stuff. Here's your select area right here. There are 2 areas you haven't seen yet that you only see through here. So here's your associative stuff that comes down through here. Notice we've got draw order as part of hatching. Okay, so we can immediately send this stuff clear to the back, which is generally where we want it when we create it. This is really the big thing I got. Notice when we hatched it before, we clicked in this and it only did that section. Well, generally we wanted to do it all the way through. That's because it was set on outer. What if we set it on the first one right there, which is normal? So let's set it on normal. Let's choose that one. And then let's go back to the boundaries area and say add points. And let's click out, and I'm going to click into that same line again. Now what did it do? Now it actually went through the whole thing and said, oh, your material here? That's good. This has got to be air then. That's got to be material. That's got to be air. So it goes through and automatically sets them for you. Now here's a case where when you're done selecting that, this is where you do not want them associative because you might have to change the hatch pattern here because it might, or this might switch to, I don't know, aluminum, whatever the case might be. And if it's associative, you don't have those options. So I'm done selecting. Yeah, darn it, hit escape, sorry. Yeah, let me just double click that. So I've got this box here. So I would come over on to the options area and I would have them as separate hatches. I would take that associative off and put these as separates. And that's right in through here where my cursor is going. Have them create separates. Now what that's going to do, it's going to make this hatch its own hatch, this one its own. Now you can edit this thing. You can explode these. I'd be careful, because if you explode this, it's not only going to break it from there to there, what else is it going to do? These are all lines now, and if you try and edit that, you're going to be quite a while. So you want to be a little careful on that. If you want just the ignore section, maybe you can click on that, whatever. This gives you more options on how to work. So I would just go straight, if you got anything that's out of normal, set it on separate hatches, do a hatch, then it should retain those values for you. Now if you ever have to change them, you know how to get into this dialog box. Now, there's one other area on here, where is it? Over on the right side, see that gap tolerance? Right over here. This is where they fix that little thing where it leaks out and tries to do the universe. Generally, I think this is by default set to